In Ethiopia, the dead are carried away to a traditional burial in a land where famine is traditional. But this time, the famine is worse than ever. What's also worse, and to the embarrassment of the West, the food which could save them is already in store in Britain and Europe. Hundreds of thousands of tons of wheat, which we don't need. So why don't we give our unwanted food to save the lives of those who need it? In our green and pleasant land, the harvest doesn't fail. In South Ormsby, in Lincolnshire, a harvest festival celebration.
In Ethiopia, there is a great famine at this very moment. There has been no soft, refreshing rain, and the crops have failed. In one particular region, 40 people were reported as dying every day. 40 people. Dying through lack of food. I don't think there will be much inclination to thank the Lord for all his love in that part of the world this year. Do you?
The dead of one night lined up for burial. Mothers mourn their children. They're wrapped in ragged shrouds. They've been dead just an hour. More aid from the West could have saved them. But till now, getting governments to respond has proved nearly impossible. When Oxfam asked the British government and the Common Market for extra grain for Ethiopia last month, they were told the cupboard was bare. Grain cost money and there was no money left in the aid kitty. But what about the British and European grain mountains, climbing to record levels this year? Why can't more of that surplus be transferred to countries like Ethiopia? This is no longer a simple story of the haves and have-nots. More, it's a failure of our system to do the apparently obvious. Korum, northern Ethiopia, epicenter of the famine, where 30,000 destitute people have come to camp out, waiting for food. Families arriving in their hundreds by the day. Only the most severely malnourished children, if brought here in time, can be guaranteed food. These are the lucky ones, singing for their supper. Restored to high spirits by the Save the Children Fund. Protected for the time being from the tragedy all around them. These fields should be carpeted with ripening grain. Instead, the farmer has sold his livestock to feed his family. When did he last have a crop on this land?
3 years back.
How does he manage then to feed his family? He has 5 children.
He gets he gets a monthly ration from the government.
What does he think is going to happen to himself and his family and the other people in the village?
انتي راح تجيني ندحراي انت خوني اللي كانت تحسب. Hoping God, they're hoping that God will give them rain and grow more food.
Britain's biggest ever harvest, with 3 or 4 million tons to spare. In part, it's a tribute to the skills of British farmers. In part, a monument to common market farm policies that pay farmers to grow grain that neither Britain nor Europe can dispose of. One success story among many, East Anglian farmer John Martin.
We are a farming business. We have some 4,000 tonnes of grain that we have harvested this year, which represents the largest harvest that we have ever had. And I think most other farmers in this district have been similarly fortunate.
Does it present storage problems actually for you on the farms?
Well, we've had to expand the storage, and every nook and cranny has got grain in it, and we shall be glad to get it empty in time for next year's harvest.
This year's surplus grain builds another common market mountain. It's the Ethiopian emergency that is now forcing a rethink.
In the years that I have been farming, we have been constantly exhorted in the national interest to increase our yields, increase our output. It does seem awful that now we have succeeded in doing this. We now are guilty of some awful crime and putting a burden on everybody. We like to think that now we have succeeded, it is everybody else's failure not to use more sensibly what we have produced for the common good.
And do you think these surpluses, and of course our concern is the third world and countries like Ethiopia, do you think these surpluses could be imaginatively used to help starving people elsewhere?
Not only could they be, I think they jolly well must be. We have got, through the goodness of the good Lord and through a lot of hard work all the way along the line, we have got now a store of food surplus to the immediate requirements of people in this country. And I think not only is some moral obligation, but also in the longer term self-interest, a real value in making sure that people who are hungry are fed. We have got the grain here. The challenge is just to get it into the mouths and stomachs of those who so desperately need it.
Some common market relief grain has reached northern Ethiopia. This is from the aid budget, though. The grain mountain remains intact. Whole families have walked 100 miles or more and then camped for weeks for a handout. A sack for a family for a month, and these are still the lucky ones. Planned common market relief this year is enough to keep Ethiopia going for about a fortnight, unless there's a change of heart. And it takes surprisingly small quantities to keep people alive, as Save the Children Fund nutritionist Kathy Bogan explains.
Well, in this kind of situation where people are just sitting around, not doing very much, between about sort of 1,000, 1,500 calories would be the minimum, just to keep them ticking over.
What does that mean in terms of wheat?
Roughly about 500 grams of wheat a day.
Just a pound of grain a day and people live. Even the children know that every grain makes a difference. A meal from the dust. And it doesn't matter where that grain comes from. British wheat, all this wheat sitting around in the common market, is that the sort of stuff that will keep these people alive?
Sure, yes. Wheat is wheat when it comes down to feeding people like this. There's no difference, really.
This is the grain that the critics say gets overlooked. A converted aircraft hangar and a foothill in Britain's own grain mountain. British taxpayers have bought this grain as part of the common market support system for farmers. It's been taken into intervention, whether or not it will ever be resold. And this year, there's a real storage problem.